Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Hiron. I'm chair of Album. My day job is running a bus company in Essex, or several bus companies in Essex. And with me is Tony DePledge, Album's policy advisor. Album is a membership organisation. We represent the SME sector within the bus industry. Tony has a varied and distinguished career in both the deregulated and state-controlled sectors, latterly spending 10 years as a director of Northern Ireland Transport. So I'm going to try and explore with Tony some of the issues facing the industry in the year or two ahead. So Tony, first of all, the new government's mantra is taking back control. What, in your view, does taking back control mean?
Well, the Minister, I think, tried to articulate that quite well. It's an expectation that local leaders will be able to make decisions about bus services in their local areas. And he mentioned about the need to ensure that there's money behind that, which actually I think is probably the biggest challenge of all. Well, actually, there are two big challenges there, one of which is the skills that local authorities would have to be able to exercise that control in a positive and constructive way. The second would be having the resources, financial resources, to be able to do that. So it clearly, as we I think saw during the pandemic period, this is greater involvement with local authorities. And you know, if you were to ask what was the biggest failure of deregulation in the 1980s, I would say that it was the way in which bus operators and local authorities diverged. Local authorities often saw bus operators as another commercial activity competing for scarce road space and didn't necessarily see buses as part of the whole transport mix. And of course, in the same way that local authorities now often don't manage off-street car parking, which is also part of the transport mix. So there are, it would be quite interesting if we could talk about getting control of car parking back. On-street car parking is clear, but off-street car parking is not. So there's a whole range of activities out there, but I think it's what he's really talking about is local authorities being able to have greater influence. And the influence will probably be commensurate with the amount of money they can put into it. Power flows where money flows, frankly.
Okay, thank you. Now, the other hot topic, I guess, is allowing more municipal companies. Now, Tony, prior to your work with Arriva, you spent a long time running the renowned Blackpool Transport, running trams and buses, municipal operators. So presumably, you would say more municipal operators must be a good thing.
I'm a bit of an agnostic when it comes to the ownership structure. I think that there is absolutely nothing wrong with local authority ownership of bus companies, provided that's exercised in a way which makes good use of the resources that are being employed in the operation of the service. If you look at what happened to the local authority bus companies between 85 and now, an awful lot of them failed. Some were too small, some were in the invidious position of serving only part of a local authority area because the local authority being combined with another local authority, and so you've got the bus company in that part of the local authority area and nothing in the other, which clearly makes it very difficult for the local authority to be interested in the bus company for the whole of its patch. And some were not as well managed as might have been hoped. Some also didn't get governance right. And one of the things we've been saying to government here is that if they are going to open up the opportunity for local authorities to own, set up or acquire bus companies, they do need to get the governance right, Bill, and the governance is a really important aspect of all this. Somebody asked me recently, does anybody know what arm's length actually means? Is there a definition of arm's length anywhere? And I'm not actually sure there is. I could go into lots of detail about how the European Union regulations define what control means for local authority companies, but I couldn't actually absolutely be clear about what arm's length might mean. But what I think it means in practice is you need to have a proper recognition that the local authority bus company is not a local authority transport department. It is actually an organisation which needs to live and exist, and it needs to be able to make profits. I've heard suggestions that it would mean not-for-profit companies. I mean, not-for-profit companies is a non-starter. It's a completely alien concept. I was talking to somebody in the USA this year about who works in the charity sector, and she runs a so-called not-for-profit company in California. So I said, what does not-for-profit mean in this concept? And she said, well, it means not for dividend, really, rather than not for profit. She said, there's no mission without margin. You can't deliver what it is you want to do unless you're able to fund that, whether that means funding it by buying, purchasing your assets, or being able to cope with the sorts of slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, things that happen to you during the course of your operating year. So I think we need to make sure that the governance is right and the fundamentals of how companies should be run. And as you've heard me say, Bill, the local authority landscape is littered with the carcasses of failed local authority companies where they've been set up with good intentions but were not actually properly structured to work in a sensible way, whether that's housing companies or development companies or regeneration companies or building companies. You just have to read Private Eye on a regular basis and find out all the issues that come out of all that. Now, I don't want to see local authorities setting up bus companies that are going to fail, and I'm absolutely certain that this government does not want to see local authorities setting up companies that fail. So part of that is, let's get the basic rules right. There are one or two things we can actually do to improve the few remaining local authority companies as part of that process, one of which is taking away their restrictions on borrowing, which was a rather strange concept in 1985, which was to do with ensuring that the local authority couldn't use its bus company as a way of getting around capital expenditure controls. But with that, I think generally beyond that, we actually are in quite a good place. Local authority companies have boards of directors, the executive directors of the company, the non-executive directors, some of whom are councillors, some of whom are not. These can be structured very well. So I'm not sure I see a huge appetite for setting up local authority companies around the country, but we can certainly help them and give them some pointers in the right direction. But if it was we want to set this up so it'll be a not-for-profit business that can bid for contracts in our area, I'm not sure I see that as much of a recipe for success, I'm afraid.
So you would see, other than the change in borrowing rules, you would see it as important that any new local authority companies are set up pretty much based on the same template as existing local authority companies?
I think pretty much. I think experience has shown us over the years that pretty well works. I mean, it is a difficulty because if you say to the local authority, what are the objectives your company should be delivering? And the local authority will say lowest fares, highest services, highest wages, newest fleet, biggest dividend. And you say, well, which of those is the most important? And the answer is, well, it depends in the year when you ask me. Because if I'm just doing the council tax fixing, it's going to be biggest dividend. If there's a row about wages, it's going to be highest wages. If there's an election coming up, it's definitely going to be lowest fares and highest service level. So the local authority company has to find the right balance between all those things, which I characterise as optimising that list of things. You're not maximising any of them. And actually, in many ways, that's what public transport does. We are always trying to optimise the wishes of the public out there to try and come up with the best solution to a quite complicated mix of what the customers want. So I think our experience says that the ones that are still existing have got a pretty reasonable handle on how to actually deal with the governance issues. So I think we should be okay with that.
Thank you. We will take some questions at the end, by the way, time permitting. Tony, one of the elements of taking back control, one of the possibilities, although I was pleased to hear the Minister say that it won't be the only option, is of course franchising, which isn't franchising, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. The traditional independents and the municipal sector, both represented with an album, are, I think, in the main, extremely nervous about franchising. And that's based on what has happened over a number of years in London, where independent operation is now virtually non-existent, and certainly what's happened in Manchester, where the independent sector has been all but wiped out. Now, should the public really care, should politicians really care about that? If the public are getting cheaper bus services, isn't that all that matters? Why should it matter to Joe Public or a minister or an MP that a local independent or a municipal is no longer in business?
That's quite a good question, actually. I might turn it back to you in a minute, since you actually have been involved in running one of those SMEs for a long time. It is a good question because there's no absolute right for SMEs to continue in existence. But look around what you see in the SME sector and see what they do and see how they serve the communities that they live in. See businesses that have been in the same families for 125 years. At the Album Conference in Warrington earlier this year, the representative from the Urban Transport Group, Jason Prince, said he liked SMEs because SMEs know the area. He said SMEs have, I think he called it taxi driver knowledge of what happens in their area. And that's absolutely right, they do. I worked in South Yorkshire Passenger Transport in the 1970s in Doncaster, where the PTE was busy buying all the independents around there. And I was not persuaded that we ran a better service when the PTE took them over. I mean, this is not just down to simple things like the first day we took over a service that went out towards Goole. We had a phone call saying nobody's delivered the eggs. We didn't even know they were delivering eggs on the bus service, but apparently were, and because they were part of that community. They were part of the area that they worked in. Now, I mean, that's not an anecdote that says that's a reason for SMEs to continue, but you do know the area you serve. And just look at UK Bus Awards, just look at Route 1 Awards last night, see how well the SMEs do in all these things. It is strong local knowledge, also the ability to, which a local authority will have, to speak directly to an actual person who is really going to make a difference to the operation of buses in their area. And that's a big thing as well. Short lines of control. So there's quite a range of things, I think, that say that SMEs are worth hanging on to. And it is a challenge. Franchising does present, or any contracting regime presents a challenge. And we can talk about procurement in a minute if you want to do that.
Yes.
You do.
It's fortunate you mentioned procurement, Tony, because if franchising is going to happen, and there seems to be a government acceptance that SMEs should be protected is the wrong word, that SMEs should have a continuing role to play in a franchised environment, which is good. But how do we achieve that? Because procurement people, are there any procurement people in the room, will say, can't do that. It's got to be a level playing field for everyone. What happens in mainland Europe where we have franchising? Is direct award has been talked about. I don't really understand what direct award is, how it works. But do you want to talk about the procurement and or direct award? Yeah, we've got a couple of hours, Tony.
Well, that's okay, because yeah, I mean, we certainly can empty the room talking about procurement after more than 3 minutes. After we do that, we'll go on to talking about pensions and actuarial assessments of all the other things that go in our lives. Procurement is a very, very complicated area, and I think that we perhaps should draw a distinction between mayoral authorities, mayoral combined authorities, where they have a single organisation that's focused on transport. Transport Regarding Manchester, the Liverpool Combined Authority and so on, where they've got this single organisation which itself will do its own procurement, transport people buying stuff in. If you talk to most of the shire counties or the unitaries, procurement will be done by a central procurement team who probably have very little knowledge about what it is that they're buying. And I think we see that, for example, in the reluctance in some areas of using some existing powers to be able to give money to operators under the de minimis rules. As you know, a local authority can spend up to a quarter of its budget in general terms by simply giving money to a bus company to do something that it wouldn't commercially do, but actually isn't worth actually going out to tender for. I know some authorities who say we can't do that because that's not allowed under our standing orders. Our standing orders say you have to have tenders. Well, that's just barking mad, really, because this is intended to be a way of making small changes, comparatively small changes, comparatively easily, without getting hung up in the whole procurement process. So I think one of the things I know one of the things we're saying to government is we need to be able to make sure that the people who work in procurement understand what the impact is on transport. Now, when we get into the franchising process, which is likely to be much larger contracts, thank you, we probably are talking about the sort of procurement process that Greater Manchester did, which will involve a pre-qualification process of some sort, which is likely to be extremely complex and rather bureaucratic for all sorts of good reasons to do with the way that public sector procurement works. And if you've got nothing else to do, Bill, and if anybody in the audience fancies doing it, I strongly urge that you go and read the Procurement Act 2023, and it will be a good way of passing the time until you nod off, because it is very, very detailed and explains exactly how the public sector is allowed to buy things. Now, there is a presumption in that process in favour of open competition. You talked about direct award. Direct award is where a local authority simply gives the contract without competition. That's broadly prohibited under the Procurement Act, except in some specific circumstances. And some bits of public transport are allowed for there to be direct award without actually going out to tender, but they're very, very limited. And so I'm not sure that I see that there's much scope for direct award in the bus sector beyond possibly some comparatively small areas of direct award of so-called minimum cost contracts, where where the revenue risk stays with the operator. But these are extremely difficult things. It's the sort of thing that makes your head explode, because you need to, on the one hand, to understand the implications of Procurement Act 2023. You need to understand the public service obligations in transport regulations, also 2023, and the Transport Act 1985. And when you try and work your way through all those things, then you actually will win the prize for being the person who understands how procurement works. The 2023 regulations are the post-Brexit rules. If you knew what the EU rules were, they pretty much mirror what the EU rules were. And they do permit giving contracts without competition. But it's more likely to be, franchising is more likely to be on the basis of formally structured contracts. Now, we know the government is going to issue guidance on procurement. We hope that they're going to be able to make sure it's simplified in some way, so that, sorry, I'm talking too long.
No, you're fine.
So simplified in some way, so that we don't have to expect an SME with 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 buses to have a modern slavery policy or a purchasing policy about where it sources its materials. These are things that small operators simply won't have, and big operators will just have them, they can take them off the shelf. And in fact, it's interesting, when Album commented about the situation in Manchester, where the SME sector is broadly wiped out in the franchising, the response we got back from Manchester was to say, if large national and international operators decide to bid for small contracts and school franchises, and they bring their bidding teams to work on that, then the Transport Authority can't stop them, and it's therefore no surprise that most Greater Manchester franchise went to international operators. That's just not an acceptable answer. And it's not in line with what the government is saying, and it's absolutely not in line with what those 2 major pieces of procurement law say, which is you must consider the interests of SMEs when you are structuring your contracting work. So it is a worry. My other worry, by the way, Bill, which I suspect you might have going to ask me about, my other worry is local authorities who don't make a decision about anything. And we have a constant uncertainty about are they going to go for franchising or are they not. And if we are in a position where a local authority can make a decision tomorrow to go for franchising, why would I spend money buying vehicles today and investing in electric vehicles today? I can do you a lesson from history. Do you want a lesson from history?
Go on, Tony. I do love your lessons from history.
Lesson from history, which David and I go back a long way. So he and I will probably understand the Tramways Act of 1870. But if you want to have a lesson from history, the Tramways Act of 1870...
Didn't you write the Tramways Act?
No, I didn't write the Tramways Act of 1870. And it's very kind of you to suggest that, because I just discovered today that I'm slightly older than the Service 50 bus in Birmingham, which makes me feel very old indeed. But if we got time, I'll give you a 2-minute summary of the Transport Act of 1870.
Yes,
Tramways Act of 1870.
We have time. You're okay.
Right. 1870 Tramways Act was intended to promote the development of tramways, and it allowed local authorities to build tramways, but it didn't allow them to run them. They had to give a concession to a company to run the tramway, and the concession was for 21 years. And at the end of the 21 years, the concession could be given again, but the Act said it can only be for 7 years. Trams last about 30 years. So at the end of the 21 years and the 7-year extension, your trams are pretty much worn out. But you're now only going to get a 7-year extension and another 7-year extension. So why would you ever buy anything ever again? What the local authority was allowed to do, it was to compensate you and take that business away from you, but they were only allowed to pay the asset value. They were not allowed to pay the business value. So it was so-called scrap iron clause. So you could say, oh yeah, my trams are worth X. You can have them, you local authority. But the effect was it stifled investment in trams in the early part of the 20th century. And why places like Bristol never bought a tram. They carried on with the ones they'd had originally until the system was bombed out of existence in the Second World War. So there are lessons from history which say, just be careful what you actually do, because you stifle innovation and you stifle investment. So I'll get Chris Cheek. When next time Chris Cheek's doing an update to his How Buses Work, which I strongly urge you to have.
Is he paying you to do that?
No, he's not. I'm suggesting it's worth reading because it's very good. But I might get him to write a bit about the Tramways Act of 1870 because he wasn't there either.
I mean, actually, Tony, it's a very interesting point because there is an area not too far from where I operate that has been talking about franchising for several years and is currently out to consultation on franchising. But it has meant that for the last couple of years, there's a route we run that probably deserves an increase in frequency, but would involve extra vehicles, extra drivers. And we're saying to ourselves, well, if we're going to have franchising in a year or two, why do I want to stomach the losses that is going to incur for the first year or two of operation, only to have the business taken from me in a few years' time?
So is this a reason for despair?
I never despair. I'm always optimistic, particularly when I'm sitting next to you, Tony.
Oh dear.
Let's move on. We've still got another 5 minutes.
No, we haven't, because David's going to ask some questions. Yeah, we're nearly coming to an end because we need to give the audience 5 minutes for their questions.
Okay.
But I was just saying, is it a reason for despair? And the answer is no, it isn't a reason for despair. It might feel like it, but it isn't. We are in that cycle which comes around about every 40 years where we start to redo what happens in buses. There's a transitional process which is very painful and very difficult. We have to work with the government to try and persuade them of some of the threats that they put to us in order to be able to ensure that we actually can deliver what they want. Franchising is simply an output. What we actually want is an outcome. And the outcome we want is better bus services, more frequent bus services. So bus services actually are the logical choice for more and more of your journeys. And that's the outcome I think we all want to gain at, all want to get at. In the meanwhile, we need to persuade government they don't actually do anything that makes that go wrong. You know, what was the mantra the department had to have? Move fast and fix things. Yeah, please move fast and don't break things. Indeed,
and you know it's being tripped up by unintended consequences that we've got to be very mindful of. An album works alongside CPT. We don't seek to duplicate what CPT does. They do a very good job.
Yeah.
Album's role is to home in on those issues that are SME specific, where we see there is a specific risk or a specific opportunity or a specific issue relating to SMEs. And that is what, with our wider membership and with Tony's help, we will carry on doing. Is that what I was supposed to say, Tony?
I think that's what you were supposed to say. Yeah, that and buy the book. Yes. David.
Gentlemen, thank you. Tony and Bill, ladies and gents. And thank you very much indeed, Tony, for sharing your bedtime reading habits with us. It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
To know what you get up to.
Yeah.
So you heard the Minister say there that one size does not fit all, different horses for different courses. Did you take any comfort from that at all, particularly in terms of the discussion about SMEs and their future and just what's going to happen around the country?
I do, and I think it's great that there appears to be an increasing recognition within government of the roles that SMEs play within the bus industry, and indeed the role they should continue to play. And I think that is broadly accepted at government level now. I would like to think. I think that the challenge now is to make sure that that view trickles down to all the local authorities that are considering franchising, but also, particularly, as Tony has been saying, that we find a way of translating that into reality. Because it's all very well saying SMEs should have a continued role, but how do we set up the tenders, the procurement? How do we minimise the reams and reams of bureaucratic paperwork that accompany the whole franchising process, such that SMEs aren't put off at the first hurdle?
It's about doing as well as saying, isn't it? Anyway, anybody got any questions? Oh, loads of people. I'll come to you first.
Hi, it's Sarah Gayton from the National Federation of the Blind of the UK. This is completely different to what you've talked about, but I think this is an essential issue that needs to be tackled. In active travel schemes that are putting cycle lanes in, they are causing a real danger and inaccessibility for blind people to cross what's called a floating bus stop or a shared use bus border, where your passengers have to literally step into a live cycle lane or cross one. We're doing an event, would you please come to it in London if you can, and also alert your members to it. But we fundamentally want the bus stop to be protected so passengers can get on and off the bus directly from the pavement, and the cyclists will have to wait behind the bus.
It's a shame you were you here yesterday, because we did a lot of discussion about this yesterday. Yeah. But do you want to give it? Maybe
it's a very important issue. It is largely a question about local authorities and the design of highways and the associated things that go with it. I entirely understand the point you make. I've had friends who say, "Why is the cycle lane next to the green grass? When I'm walking my dog along, I have to walk in the path which is not next to the grass." And the answer is because bus passengers don't want to step off the bus straight into a cyclist who's just there. It's important, but and we can happily tell local authorities about that, but it is a local authority issue, I'm afraid.
Yeah, this cropped up when we were talking about accessibility regulations on buses, but it's not just on the buses, it's getting to the bus stop and getting from there.
We can catch you about it later,
Oh, okay. So.
Hello there, my name's Steve. My question's directed towards Bill, if you don't mind, as you're the chair and also an operator. On the Album website, on the homepage, it mentions about encouraging, one of your aims is to encourage more people to use a bus. Now, as an organisation and an operator, how do you achieve that? Is it more through a product-based, or is it through a market-based approach?
It's through a whole range of things. I mean, I think everyone in the industry knows that getting more people onto buses is a huge task, and it involves doing a whole load of things. One thing on its own generally won't hack it. So the £2 fare cap, as an example, has generated traffic on certain routes in some areas, but the government report that we haven't seen yet, we believe is going to come out and say it's poor value for money, because that's what they said in the budget. And that proves that even if you have big reductions in fares, certainly for longer journeys, in isolation, it won't necessarily get more people on buses. those operators have been involved in quality partnerships and all the other names they've had over the years, and indeed local authorities, will recognise that it comes down to decent bus priority, so the bus can get you there more quickly than a car can. It involves accessible vehicles, it involves friendly drivers, it involves good infrastructure, it involves high frequency, it involves good marketing, 101 different things. So there isn't one easy answer. Album is not an operator. Album is a membership organisation. But what we do know is that Album members between them have an awful lot of experience in all of those bits of best practice, some collectively, some individually. But there's an awful lot of things to do.
Okay.
But it's not bus operators' own, I mean, it is a partnership. It relies very much on third parties like local authorities, as well as operators. And indeed central government.
A giant jigsaw that has to interlock, basically. Yeah.
Hi, Kirsten Keane, Transport for the North. For SMEs, is it more important to reduce the need for procurement, or is it more important to support them to deliver more? So, for instance, you use the modern slavery statement. Is it remove that from the list or support more SMEs to add it?
I think it's potentially both of those things. It may be that the right way forward, and again, these are things we're discussing, it may be the right way forward is that there is some sort of standard statement that we can actually sign up to. Because actually, nobody, I'm mentioning modern slavery policy isn't to belittle or denigrate the need to have that sort of approach, clearly. But actually, very few SMEs will have something articulated in those terms. So maybe it's somehow helping by saying, this is this and this. I'm not. In the old days, you used to have to say when you went to America, you had to tick a little box which said, is it your intention to overthrow the government of the United States by force? You actually said when you arrived at immigration in the US, and then, of course the answer is, well, no. Though actually, those of you who remember Gilbert Harding will know he wrote on his form sole purpose of visit, which is much more entertaining. But it could be that sort of approach where we can actually help with statements that comply with the objectives that the authority wants.
It's a very interesting point because I first came across this a couple of years ago. Because of our size, there is no legal requirement for us to have a modern slavery policy. I think it's below 250 employees. I can't remember what the level is, but it's a certain size of organisation doesn't need one in law. And we came across a tender question that said, do you have a modern slavery statement? So we said no. And the tendering authority came back and said, well, why haven't you got one? And we went back and said, well, we don't need one. And, we went round in circles for a little bit. So again, it's another example of not denigrating that there might be valid reasons to have one, but if it isn't required in law, why is any local authority suggesting that an SME should have one?
Should have one, absolutely. Right, so we'll try and get to you.
It's Steve Hunter, Head of Transport at Warrington Council, and we've got one of the last municipal bus operators who has an SME are running over 80% of our services. Very pleased to hear the Minister and yourselves say that there are other options to franchising. And I suppose there's two questions. One, we'd like to go from 80% public ownership, perhaps to 100% public ownership. And I suppose one, is that a good thing? And two, what legislation would we need to see changed to be able to do that? You
say you want to go from 80% public ownership to 100% in Warrington, so 20% of your operation is not Ben's business.
Oh, you mean other operators running within Warrington?
Yeah. Well,
okay, understood.
Yeah, I don't think there's an absolutely ideal mix. I suspect that some of the operations that you've got in Warrington are cross-boundary things coming in from other areas. You're going to be strongly affected by what happens in Liverpool and Greater Manchester as well. And I know there's thoughts of a combined authority for the two Cheshires and Warrington. So again, that will be something that needs to be thought through. I'm not sure there's an ideal mix, but actually, if you have the powers to acquire, that might actually solve what you want to do. But I think it's too detailed a question to answer in 2 seconds, Steve, but I'll happily talk about it.
OK, we've just got time for one more very quick question from the back here, and then we'll need to wrap up.
So I was interested in your comments, David Ritchell from South West England, really about the fare cap. One of the biggest debates we're having in the counties of the South West and Bristol with the combined authority mayor Dan Norris, is actually whether that £6 return is far too high in an urban area. So I'm not sure that the mayors agree necessarily that this is a failure. And I would just say that to operators, we need to go work through this. We've got a BSIP board tomorrow, in fact, to go try and, they want us to come in line with the government's ideas in England for 1st of January. I think there'll be resistance in the West Midlands Combined Authority. There is, in fact, at the 4 councils involved, including North Somerset. So I just understand, yeah, Tony, I agree, you need safe routes, you need good shelters, you need good interchanges, you need high quality and clean buses provided by First in Stagecoach or Go Ahead in our area. But effectively, what we also need is fares that are affordable in the cost of living crisis, whether it's a rail fare, a National Express or a Flix fare, or a local bus. And I think there is a combination. Would you agree then, the question, that the combined authority mayors should have powers to look at their fare caps and their fare regimes if we're not going to do it at a national level? So taking away this at a blanket level is not necessarily agreed by passenger groups across England.
Okay.
Well, it's again very complicated issue because fare caps by themselves may or may not be the right answer in an area. It may be that actually the real people you need to support are young people just moving into the world of work. They actually might need more support than necessarily some of the fares that are affected by the fares cap, especially since people like me don't pay anyway because we're already getting a concession. I think you should be able to discuss all those things, and you locally need to work out where you're going to spend your money. And that's probably the best thing I can say. The other thing we have to recognise is running buses is an expensive business. It isn't a free thing. The changes in national insurance will probably add about 95 million to bus operator costs across the country. I think CPT have come up with that figure, and I'm sure they're absolutely right. I mean, that's not an insignificant amount of cash that has to be found to keep bus services going and paying drivers properly. And the minimum wage change probably doesn't have a huge impact on most of our employees directly, but it does affect differentials. So it does immediately start to work through as well. But I think everything should be on the table to be able to discuss what you want to do.
Okay.
Sorry, I was going to add one thing.
Okay.
Which is that, I was quoting what we believe is government's view on the £2 fare cap. Every bus operator has a different view because the success of the £2 fare cap has varied from area to area depending on the sorts of services you operate, the geography, the demography, demographics. So there is no simple answer. I was simply quoting what we believe is the government viewpoint.
Okay, gentlemen, as ever, time has defeated us, but thank you very much. Bill Hiron and Tony DePledge, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.